Okay, welcome everyone to this product council session. We're going to be talking about open banking, PISP, Fintechs, and the work of that work stream, which is led by Alan Kajangwe. Alan is on the call now, and I'm going to hand over to Alan and ask you to present the latest outputs from this work stream. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. So like Paul said, we're going to review the status of this work stream. I'm just going to share presentation. Just give me 1 second. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we see it.
All right. Okay, so first, what we set out to do was to see the kind of work that is already available, either in the Mojaloop community itself, or also to look a little bit further out on some of the global standards that already exist, to get inspired by those. And as you can see on this slide, on this first slide, there are some work that has been done on the Mojaloop switch itself, be it on the work stream that is being led by Paul Baker on the PISP project, the Mojaloop PISP project. There is also some work, though I don't know whether we have an active work stream on this, but there is definitely some work that has been done on the third-party SDK component. And then Tink and Open Bank project are outside of the Mojaloop right now. And Tink is an API that is not open source. Actually, I was led to it by Paul Macon. And the Open Bank project is open source, and it follows pretty much some global standards, or is one of the global standards that people get to use as a reference, or set out to use it as is. And so what we are trying to do in this workstream is to actually look at the third-party SDK, the Mojaloop third-party SDK, and the Open Bank project, to see how we can extend the third-party SDK where it's not meeting some of the global standards, or if we see that we need to completely change, then that decision can be made at that point. But from what I've seen so far, I think we can try and extend. At least this would be the fastest and a better way to use of our time in this work stream, which is supposed to end by the end of April, I believe, to use some of the work that is there and get ourselves inspired by some of the work that is done as part of the open banking project. So this is pretty much the exploratory work that we have done so far, and some of the conclusions that we have come up with. And of course, the Mojaloop PISP project is here, which is because we also want to refer ourselves to it, because this is the project that is building the APIs that will be interfacing with the switch. So we would see whether at some point we also make that interface between this open banking API component with the PISP work, the Mojaloop PISP work stream that Paul Baker is working on, is leading. So far, this was just as an introduction. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to stop me. So this is basically just our slide, internal slide as a team to try and understand what we are trying to achieve here by clearly first defining what the open banking is. And since there are already some standards out there, there's really no point us trying to re-engineer the wheel. So we will try to come up with something that abides by those standards, global standard that exist. And then since we already have an adopter in Rwanda, we will try to also try to see if we can meet some of the specific requirements that, because here we have a chance to build this open banking solution and immediately have some adopters. I think I've mentioned that Irembo is one such adopter, even though the interface between Irembo and R-Switch is going to use the existing ISO 222. But going forward for other PISPs, fintech, third-party payment aggregators, it would be best to use an open banking API rather than the cumbersome ISO 222, and which obviously takes a lot of time for integrators to get accustomed with. So basically, what we're going to be doing between now and end of April is to come up with a solution that we can also expose to some adopters here in Rwanda to see whether they can use it, and then that way validate it. Actually, in my acceptance criteria slide, we have that as a key component of what we would consider a successful workstream at this point, is to be able to make a non-financial institution, a payment aggregator, for instance, to be able to use this open banking API to initiate a payment to a DFSP who owns a customer's account. So the objective for this PI, obviously we want to be compliant, but at the same time, if we are talking open banking, we want some added value down the chain, and to foster innovation for those fintechs that would like to create some innovation around and then take advantage of the open switch. Here I'm calling it open switch because we'll be providing this solution via the R-Switch Mojaloop Hub, of course. So our objective, the first objective, basically, like I've said above, is going to explore some of those standards that exist, one of them being the open banking project. But then in our implementation, we're going to be looking at the Mojaloop third-party SDK component to try and extend this one, to meet some of the global standards if it doesn't already do so. And then, of course, we'll take a look at the PISP project to see how that would be what we use to interface with the hub itself. And then, basically all this leads us to creating an MVP or a pilot that we will then expose to financial institutions and fintechs to test those APIs. please stop me if you have any questions.
No,
Right,
it's all
so
very clear so far, Alan.
okay, great. So, and so our acceptance criteria for this pilot phase. So here I'm basically saying pilot phase, but like I said, we might actually have something that will be most likely exposed to some early adopters in Rwanda. So we might eventually be at a point where we have something that is way past the pilot phase, right? Which of course would be a good thing if we can achieve that. So obviously these APIs will have to meet the functional requirements as specified in the API documentation that we'll be coming up with, inspired by the open banking project, most likely, right? And then compliance with, the PSD2, which is, global standard or best practices that are used mostly in Europe and in some other countries in South America, like Brazil. Right. And then, of course, there are some specific requirements that we'll have to adhere to when it comes to the RNDPS in Rwanda. And then a successful integration between at least one banking institution that holds the consumer accounts and the fintech or a payment aggregator, to basically be able to have the payment aggregator use this open banking API to initiate a transfer request to a specific bank or MNO. And then from there, basically, we try and get the feedback and build, continuously build, improve on this feedback from the customers. I mean, from the adopters themselves. All right. So the last slide really is just an implementation plan, but it's still, a work in progress for us right now. It might obviously it might change, so I'm not going to dwell too much on it. But right now, we can consider ourselves being in the requirements gathering phase and exploratory phase to see how we want to approach our implementation. And of course, the team that's going to be mostly working on this is the WiredIn team, our team. So we put together a team that will be spending a little bit of time on this project. And of course, we would welcome anybody else that wants to chip in this work. And that is my update on this work stream. So happy, to hear your comments, feedback.
Thank you, Alan. How far are you into the planning stage? Have you started putting together activities?
Yeah, so we actually,
yeah.
So Ivan, our project manager, is going to be using the links that you share to track the activities, to create the activities, and then track. So he's going to be doing this work maybe starting from next week. So you're going to start seeing some activities on the board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And obviously your first target is going to be integration with the Rembo. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah. Even though this one is not on here, because the integration with the Rembo is not going to be using the open banking API per se, right? Yeah. And actually that work has already started. The APIs, the ISO 222 APIs that somewhat already exist, and those that were created specifically for request to pay functionalities have already been shared with Irembo, and they're currently doing their development work.
Okay. So this is I mean, as we've discussed multiple times, the primary aim of this is a general purpose
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
integration toolkit for fintechs.
correct.
So
Correct, yes.
we need to start thinking about where we could actually demonstrate this in
Yeah,
some sort of
correct.
proof of concept or pilot. So at the end
Yeah.
of step 5, we want to actually try it out with real world fintechs. So
That's right. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And actually, this is also understood by our switch. They're also on the same page.
Yeah.
Knowing that the ISO 222 interface APIs are probably not going to be the most usable APIs if they want to attract, the biggest number of fintechs that are on the market.
Mm-hmm.
So they're also looking at something a little bit more adapted to such implementers, or integrators. Yeah. So on this one, we're also on the same page. But it's for Irembo, it's because they wanted something done fairly quickly. So like I said, APIs have already been shared, and they've actually already started the work.
Yeah. But my guess is, looking at your timeline, we could potentially have something ready for a proof of concept, at least at the end of this PI.
Yeah, that is really our wish right now, and I think we can achieve that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. There are a couple of points that I wanted to raise. First of all, I hear it said, with what justice I know not, that open banking APIs, there are at least as many of them as there are implementers, and probably slightly more.
Yep, it's true.
And therefore, if what we want is something which is going to be a Mojaloop standard, then we will certainly need to take that into account. The second point, I guess, is I'm not quite sure why we have been so quick to dismiss ISO 20022 as a possibility. Now, I'm aware that it doesn't cover all of the possible eventualities for certainly not, it doesn't cover the same ground as the open banking interface, but it covers some of the same ground, and it certainly covers the stuff that has to do with executing payments. At least we think it does. So given that we're using ISO 20022 elsewhere, I wonder whether we ought to consider using ISO 20022 in this area as well, particularly because there's some talk going round that we might go back to the ISO 20022 organization and see if we can make a proposal to expand the reach of their APIs to cover more of the things that third-party access will need than it does now.
Yeah, can I respond to that first?
Please do.
First of all, on there being a plethora of standards, there is indeed. There's as many as there are countries, almost, if not more. However, there are one or two out there that we feel are more standard than most other standards. We did actually discuss this with an external consultant who specializes in open banking. And her advice is that we should look at the UK's open banking standard and Brazil's, and maybe one or two others, and derive a midway between them. In fact, I believe the Brazilian standard is actually based on the UK open banking standard. So that's the approach we're using. When at first sight, it seems there's a lot of standards, and there are, but 95% of them are not really used much. And we're trying to focus on the 5%. So that's the first thing to say about that. Secondly, on ISO 222, Michael, I completely agree. And in fact, you lead a work stream on precisely that.
I do?
Yes, you do. It's a strategic work stream, and you were briefed or tasked with the concept of talking to the ISO 22 organizations and saying, can we look at messaging, message groups or messaging standards for specifically PISP and AISP? And that will feed into a later version of this work stream. So the initial one will focus more on open banking standards as they exist, or the 5% of them that are worth considering. And a future phase will look at the replacement of that with a message schema specifically for open banking for ISO 222. Does that seem reasonable?
Entirely.
Okay, Alan, are you okay with what I've just said?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I don't think we are dismissing the ISO 222, Michael. I think it was more to see what is already considered a global standard out there, and then try to use that while we also wait for the ISO 222 work stream to complete its work. And then, we can always have a version 1 and a version 2. Version 1 basically using the current APIs, and then version 2 could basically point to ISO 222 based APIs.
Okay, good. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? We don't need to go over that ground again, I don't.
I have one other question.
Please.
And that's a question that, as I think everybody here knows, we are currently engaged in a multi-scheme Mojaloop implementation. And the question I want to ask is, on our list of things that we should be able to do we have something that says a PISP in Rwanda, let's say, should be able to connect to a DFSP in Egypt, let's say?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is to say, do we expect this to work across schemes where those schemes are linked?
My sense is, for the moment, no. I think you're definitely looking at version 2 there. I think we
same feeling here. Yeah. So basically, if we want if we want to have something, at least something that we can pilot between now and end of April, then we need to also, reduce the number of things that we might want to do, right? And then maybe just phase this one out. Put it into phases. Maybe first phase is to come up with an acceptable standard, pilot that, and then the next phase would now be either to look at the ISO 222 APIs to added to the open banking workstream, and then in the third phase, then to look at cross-border. But yeah, at least that's how I would approach this at this point.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think really what I'm saying, well, what I'm trying to say is that if we do think that's an eventual use case that we would want to cover, we should be checking when we do the simple use cases that we're not doing them in such a way that it will make it more difficult for us to do the later ones.
I think that's an extremely good point. Yes. Yes,
yep.
And also it needs to be noted on the roadmap somewhere for this work stream. So yes, I agree. Yeah,
sure.
I think we'll just take that on board. I'll add it on as a future phase. That plus ISO 222, which was already there, but I don't see it noted anywhere. Okay, fine. We'll just extend the roadmap a little.
Sorry, I mean, when I asked that question, it was intended as a question. Now, it might be a proper answer to that to say no, we don't want to support it
Well,
because
the
it's
thing is,
going to
I
be
think we do. I think I can absolutely see that we would need that in a future scenario, particularly a COMESA scenario. I can well imagine that being the case. So we should be taking it into account.
Yeah, I
Absolutely,
suppose.
yeah. So, sorry, Michael. I think
No,
if the cross-border work stream or the cross-border work is done and validated, definitely we want to take advantage of that as well to allow you know PISPs in other countries to to be able to to initiate payment into a different country. So I don't see why we can basically restrict ourselves to not being able to take advantage of that.
well, let me sketch out a scenario. At the moment, Google Pay, for instance, works on a per jurisdiction basis. And that's largely, I think, because, there aren't very many regional schemes, at least not retail schemes of that kind. But if you were, for instance, to say to Google, how would you like to set up in Rwanda and be able to have users right the way across the COMESA region just use the Rwandan connection to connect Google Pay to accounts wherever they are? Google Pay would probably think that was quite a useful thing for them. Well, they might do, because one of the other things that they worry about a lot is making sure that they don't incur any kind of financial liability as a consequence of operating. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good thing, does it?
Alan, do you have a view?
Yeah, no, so I think, so if we are considering just one aspect of, one such use case like Google Pay, how they do this, yes, I can see what you're saying, Michael, but I could also see where right now, for instance, MTN, Airtel are already doing cross-border P2P, even though it's not very popular yet. So the next phase would MTN, if they haven't already started, allow me, if I'm in Kenya, for instance, to use my mobile money to basically pay at any merchant, right? That would be cross-border merchant payment.
Yeah.
And then we want to also go further and say, does a PISP in Kenya that I'm using, could I use it to initiate, if I have the app, to basically initiate a payment via my account here in Rwanda, right? So I think there are scenarios that could be considered, but I think this MTN scenario would most likely take advantage of what we are saying here. If we are able to make this work stream or rather this open API available cross-border, right? So I don't think we should not do it because there is Google Pay does it bilaterally. I think I don't know whether that's what you said, Michael, but that's what kind of like understood. But there is room basically for this as well to potentially work cross-border.
Yeah, I suppose the worry that's in the back of my mind, and I mean, maybe it's not a maybe it's not a worry that I should have, is certainly when I think of these things, I think of small companies, agile companies, local companies, using PISP or AISP facilities to help uptake of payment systems, and also to help people in the countries where they're located by being able to connect their excellent business ideas to a payment system. What I don't want to happen is for a bunch of multinational Western companies to exploit that to essentially run the locals off the patch.
I take your point, Michael, but alternatively, I would expect, hold on, I would expect an integrated economic area such as COMESA or the European Union or the East Africa EAC. I would expect them to mandate that these systems will operate across their entire economic area, multiple jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, I think that we would prefer to be able to support it.
Okay.
I do take account of your comment though about Google walking in and taking over the whole lot. I mean, yeah, it's not a great view.
I think
that's for regulators to decide, I'd suggest.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think
Alan.
I think another scenario to alleviate Michael's fears would be maybe MTN was probably not a great one, but if we are looking at, for instance, Vuva, which is one of the most popular delivery app here in Rwanda, right? So I could see them potentially taking advantage of something like this, right? If there were things that they wanted, for instance, to expose to payers in Kenya, right? Right now they deliver strictly in Rwanda, right? So they could potentially say there are some things that maybe a Kenyan buyer wants to buy in Rwanda, and we have some agreements with Rwandair that goes to Kenya 3 or 5 or 4 times a day, right? Then we have a way for you to buy things here, pay us here, and then we deliver it for you, right? So this could open up a whole new business avenue for a company like Vuva, right? And others, of course. I'm sure if something like this is exposed, it could be taken advantage of by such local fintechs and startups.
Well, I suppose, we all know how this works. If the opportunity is large enough, then a company like, let's say, Deliveroo or Uber Eats or whatever will move in. They will undercut the local suppliers until they go out of business or until they can buy them, and then they can charge what they like.
Capitalism. Right, so
in one of its more destructive forms. Yes.
No. So what I'm saying is that it might be useful to keep this at quite a low level, a level where it doesn't become attractive to the Ubers and the Deliveroos of this world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying we have to, I'm not saying that this is my settled belief. I'm just trying to explore ideas here.
Yeah. Should we prejudge that though, or is
Maybe
that for local regulators to decide on?
Well, it's certainly the case that a local regulator could say only companies incorporated in this jurisdiction can act as PISPs. But then we lose the I mean, the problem then is if you get a patchwork, let's say across the COMESA region, where some jurisdictions allow other PISPs to connect to DFSPs and others don't, then that's going to be problematic for the ease of payments overall. I mean, I think Alain's characterization of how this might work in a Rwanda, Kenya, for instance, scenario is terrific. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we would want to encourage.
Yeah, agreed.
But, I'm just thinking about the law of unintended consequences.
Yes, of course. Yes, which tend to be the ones that dominate. Okay, thanks. I think we just need to put that on the roadmap for consideration in the future for now. But I do take your point. The pros and cons need to be weighed up carefully. But yes, we don't need to decide that in this PI, certainly. Okay, thank you. That's been a very useful discussion. Does anyone else have anything they want to add? No.
Not right now. Very useful.
No, it's been really good. Do you want to add anything else, Mike?
Well, I was going to say, and I might have just missed this in Alain's presentation, are we expecting the open banking to include setting up the relationship between the PISP and the DFSP?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because that's something which is quite outside ISO 20022 at the moment. They don't do that.
Yes, and that was part of the thinking behind needing to talk to ISO 222 about this.
Sure.
Because as you said, it's just not covered on that.
Well, I think they would say it's not to do with payments. So all kinds of correspondent relationships between banks, relationships between PISPs and DFSPs, which for them means banks, they don't see as part of the remit of ISO 20022.
Well, perhaps we need to discuss that with them because it's
about
setting up a payment. So,
Yep.
Yeah. But again,
basically there will be. Sorry, these APIs will be twofold. There's going to be linking APIs, which is what would basically set up, would allow the users to provide consent to their DFSPs before they can basically allow those fintechs to initiate those payments, right? And then there will be the transfer APIs that would come next.
Yep. And presumably the authorization APIs.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay, good. Unless there's anything else, I think we can leave it there. So that's been a useful discussion. Thank you, everyone. I'll post the recording later today and you'll be able to review it at your leisure. So thank you to everyone who joined and thanks for the contributions and the discussion. It's been very good. And thank you, Alain, for presenting today.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Happy holidays.
And to you.
You too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alain. Thanks, everyone.
Right.